Hello there, happy President's Day to everybody who got the day off, and I guess unhappy President's Day to those who did not. The Total Soccer Show is not taking a day off. We will be back later today with a review of the weekend's action, including the US men's national team under-20s 1-0 loss to Panama. In the meantime, I want to introduce you to The Goalmouth. The Goalmouth is our other podcast. It's a daily soccer news podcast published 7 a.m. every weekday morning, except when I do it, it's sometimes a little bit late. You're about to hear this past Tuesday's episode from me and this past Thursday's episode from Taylor. So if you've never heard The Goalmouth before, give it a little try, take a little sample, and if you like what you hear, then please find The Goalmouth in iTunes or wherever else you subscribe to podcasts. Just search Goalmouth, it will turn up, you'll see that smiley face soccer ball, and hit subscribe, and you can listen every morning. Thank you. Liga MX breaks down barriers. Just when Ronaldo was out, they pull him back in. US soccer makes a high-profile hire, and the Champions League is back in action. Good morning and a happy Valentine's Day to you. My name is Daryl Grove, and you're listening to The Goalmouth. Today's soccer news sounds like this. Liga MX just went social. Starting this Saturday night, games from the Mexican Domestic League will be streamed via Facebook Live with English commentary for free, thereby opening the league up to people like me. And by people like me, I mean soccer fans who are, let's say, Liga MX curious but not Liga MX savvy. I don't even know whether it's called Liga MX or Liga MX. I keep hearing both. And I know there's great soccer happening there, but I'm embarrassed to say I don't speak any Spanish beyond the name of a fast food restaurant I learned watching Breaking Bad. Turns out that's not even a real place. And I can't confidently say what network Liga MX games are on and when. But all that changes this Saturday, February 18th, 10 p.m. Eastern, when Club America vs Chivas will be streamed on the Univision Deportes Facebook page with English commentary for free. I officially give this a blue thumbs up. Because this is important stuff, and here's why. Liga MX is already the most watched league in the United States. It's true, more than 1 million viewers per game, Liga MX consistently gets better viewing figures than the Premier League or Major League Soccer. But it also feels like the league that most people are missing out on because of a language barrier or maybe a cultural barrier. So while some dummies, naming no orange names, want to build a literal wall between the US and Mexico, this English language broadcast goes some way to removing a metaphorical wall, which I think is a lot more helpful. Next up, Eric Ronaldo is back in the coaching game, taking his now traditional role as head coach of an amateur US team, with which he plans on proving a point by once again beating a professional team in the US Open Cup. Ronaldo famously knocked the Portland Timbers out of the Open Cup with Cal FC back in 2012, and he's sharpening his tools, ready to claim another MLS scalp, this time with the LA Wolves. If you've ever heard Ronaldo talk about coaching, as he did in an interview on Alexi Ellis' Mutant Gene podcast back in November, you'll know he really wants to be a head coach in Major League Soccer, and you'll also be convinced, and I mean this, convinced, that he'd do a great job for someone if given a chance. So look out, MLS head coaches. You don't want to face Ronaldo in the Open Cup this year. It's not just your team's reputation on the line, it could be your job. The US Soccer Federation has hired Englishman James Bunce as, quote, high-performance director. I'm not going to do the obvious jokes about that oddly chosen job title, except to say that it sounds a lot like the title of a Doug Benson comedy album. Instead, I'll just tell you that Bunce joins US Soccer after being head of performance for the English Premier League. So what does this mean? Well, Bunce is essentially a high-end fitness and performance coach, and it will be his job to work with US national teams at all levels, as well as development academies and MLS teams. This is one of those US soccer hires that gives me pause. On one hand, it's good that we're investing in sports science and hiring the best in the business, right? On the other hand, it feels a bit splashy, a bit like US Soccer has joined a super high-end luxury gym that's endorsed by celebrities, but it might only visit once every couple of months, and then we'll be surprised when it's not losing weight. Side note, Daryl, visit the gym this week. And I'm assuming some of Bruntz's early recommendations might be pretty basic stuff that even I can see needs fixing, like, say, prioritising bigger players at youth levels is a bad idea. US national teams shouldn't play on temporary grass surfaces that slip out from under your feet, and long flights in economy class are bad for your legs. On the flip side, if James Bunce can give US Soccer the answer to the eternal riddle that is playing Mexico at the Azteca Stadium at altitude, then it might be worth every dollar. Maybe Bunce can start by watching America v Chivas this Saturday on Facebook Live. There's also Champions League action today. That snuck up on us, right? It's the round of 16 first leg games with 2 showdowns to enjoy this afternoon. Very quick previews here. It's PSG versus Barcelona on Fox Sports 1 at 2:45 Eastern. Both teams are missing key defenders, with Thiago Silva out for PSG, Javier Mascherano out for Barcelona. But this ain't your Zlatan's PSG, so expect a Barcelona win with a Neymar goal. Over on Fox Sports 2, it's Benfica versus Borussia Dortmund, also at 2:45. Young Christian Pulisic played 90 minutes for Dortmund at the weekend, so there's a decent chance he doesn't start this one for BVB. Still, here's predicting a Dortmund win with a goal from Ousmane Dembele, because why not? That's almost it from me. I've been Daryl Grove. George Qureshi will be with you tomorrow. Quick reminder that you can support the show by subscribing via iTunes and by leaving us a review. And if you need any encouragement to listen again tomorrow, here's a recent review from Pinkus D, who says, "This past Wednesday's show was a true standout. George's final 2 pieces of the show had me literally crying and then laughing out loud in the span of 45 seconds while on my morning commute." See, that could be you tomorrow. How about that? I'll leave you with today's Goalmouth top tip. Don't be tricked into romancing your partner on Valentine's Day. Do it all year round instead.
Real Madrid is a Champions League Bond villain. Bayern Munich reminds everyone that they are pretty decent at this whole soccer thing. Barack Obama could be coming to a Bundesliga stadium near you if you live in the vicinity of Darmstadt. How to lie your way into a Champions League knockout round match. And Asamoah Gyan is a terrific footballer with unethical hair. It's Thursday, February 16th. I'm Taylor Rockwell, and you are listening to The Goalmouth, a podcast collaboration between Dirty Tackle, Howler Magazine, and The Total Soccer Show. Up first, on Wednesday evening, Real Madrid played host to Napoli in the first leg of their Champions League knockout round matchup. Madrid went down early, but eventually came away with a 3-1 result, courtesy of goals from Karim Benzema, Toni Kroos, and Casemiro. However, it was the club's antics on either side of the first half that merit some subtle mockery. Prior to kickoff, early arrivers to the Bernabeu Stadium were treated to highlights of Barcelona's 4-0 loss to PSG. Apparently there was some laughing, some mockery, some pointing of fingers. Everyone had a good time. I guess Real weren't too worried about karmic retribution, though they might want to be after some decidedly shady groundskeeping tactics. I believe George dubbed it Irrigate Gate. Well done, George. As several traveling Napoli supporters pointed out on Twitter, prior to kickoff, only the side of the pitch that Napoli was attacking was watered, and heavily, I might add. At halftime, the sprinklers were once again turned on, and once again it was the side that Napoli was attacking that got the waterworks. However, as several Napoli supporters were quick to point out, given that the club's home ground floods nearly every time it drizzles, maybe it wasn't such a disadvantage, especially since Lorenzo Insigne was able to put his side ahead only 8 minutes into the game. I would like to add that I wrote a bunch of water-themed puns, references to goal-scoring droughts, for example, featured prominently, but my wife has warned me way too many times about making bad jokes at too early of an hour, so I'm just going to move on to our next bit of news. Staying in the Champions League, there's not really that much I can say about Bayern Munich's 5-1 savaging of Arsenal, so I'm instead just going to discuss this game solely through the medium of cliches. Bayern were ruthlessly efficient, Arsenal choked and/or were big game bottlers, Robben's left foot was deadly, Thomas Muller was clinical, Alexis Sanchez looked world-class, but Arsenal just didn't have any players that were willing to take the game by the scruff of the neck. As a result, questions remain about Arsenal's midfield strength and defensive stability, and you have to wonder if this is the start of another collapse. Fans will be ruining the lack of investment in the recent transfer windows, and you have to wonder if the Gunners will continue to lose big-name talent this summer as a result. Meanwhile, Manuel Neuer was steady between the posts, and Bayern cruised to an easy victory, as they are so often wont to do. Afterwards, the Bayern team likely went out for a nice liter of German beer, of course dressed in lederhosen. That last point might be made up, but, you get the point. Now, Bayern Munich might be the most well-known German club, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have the most well-known celebrity supporters. No, that honor likely goes to SV Darmstadt 98, who, it seems, are the only club in the Bundesliga that counts Barack Obama as a Twitter follower. According to German newspaper news service DW, or more accurately, Die, I read that online, so it's got to be true, quote, a little bit of social media digging by a local radio station in the Hesse region, where the Bundesliga's bottom club are based, uncovered the wholly surprising news that the former leader of the free world counts Torsten Frings' side among the 631,000 accounts that he follows, end quote. In response, U.S. international Terrence Boyd, who scored in Darmstadt's surprise win over Borussia Dortmund this past weekend, took to social media to invite the 44th president of the United States to a game. He even threw in an offer for a free jersey if Obama accepted. No word yet on why the former president follows the club, nor if he has accepted that invitation. Darmstadt does host Hertha Berlin and fellow U.S. international John Brooks on May 13th, so I'm just going to assume that he's holding out for that matchup. Of course, there are other ways to attend matches for free that don't require you to be a former world leader. Here's a quick quiz for you, dear listener, to see if you've got what it takes to attend a match on the cheap. Question number 1. Do you not enjoy paying large sums of money for tickets to big matches? Great. Question 2. Do you have a passing knowledge of a club in the English Championship? Excellent. Question 3. Does lying for personal gain not necessarily bother you? Perfect. You're all set to attend a Champions League match. At least that was the case for one enterprising fan who turned up to Borussia Dortmund's match at Benfica. The individual in question claimed to be a scout for Wigan. He was questioned for a prolonged period by security and was forced to produce documentation verifying his identity. Just kidding. He was actually able to enter the stadium and watch the entire match without spending a cent, which is especially impressive given the fact that he had absolutely nothing to do with Wigan nor their scouting network. You do have to wonder if he chose Wigan for specific reasons. They were in the Premier League recently enough that it's conceivable that they would be shopping for talent, but they're also near the bottom of the table, meaning that people would be more likely to have pity than they would suspicion. If he claimed to be a representative of Manchester City, for example, questions would get asked. But Wigan, he might get offered Mario Götze on the cheap. And finally, according to the BBC, former Sunderland striker Asamoah Gyan is among a group of more than 40 players deemed to have unethical hair under United Arab Emirates Football Association guidelines. The 31-year-old Ghanaian attacker is known for his flamboyant hairstyles of bright colors, partially shaved, sometimes words in there, sometimes pictures. The problem is that some Islamic teachings ban kaza hairstyles, where only part of the head is shaved. The fear being that children will see the hairstyles of their idols, copy them, and in so doing violate religious law. As a result, certain officials will judge whether or not players' haircuts are appropriate prior to kickoff. Players deemed to be in violation will receive a written warning, with punishments escalating to a fine and then a suspension if non-compliance continues. With that in mind, those of you wondering if Paul Pogba will ever play in the UAE finally have your answer. That's it for today's Goalmouth. You can explore all these stories in more depth by subscribing to our newsletter. The link is in the show notes. I've been Taylor Rockwell. Ryan Bailey will be with you tomorrow, but until then, here's today's Goalmouth top tip. Lying does have its place in soccer, especially if you're pretending to be affiliated with Wigan.